Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you once again for coming to ArtTable's Artnet Artist Talk. My name is Joy Glidden, and here you are at 8 or 8:30 in the morning, pre-work. It's a big effort, but it's always worth it, and of course it's especially worth it when we have people like Laurie Simmons here with us. I've got to say our previous roster has been tremendous as well, so you're in line with some amazing artists. And she will be interviewed by Fabienne Stephan, who is a curator and works at Salon94, I believe. These are the words and feelings that come rushing to the surface when I see Laurie Simmons' work. Plastic, connotative, psychological, perplexing, dreamy, confrontational, blameless, elusive, impressionistic, political, stunning, transgressive, haunting, deep, romantic, conceptual, lyrical, pensive, heady, domestic, moody, sexy, eerie, transfixing, riveting, mysterious, evocative, and brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Only that?
Yeah, really. Exactly. One thinks about family, relationships, love. One thinks about how utterly complex our life interactions are, our values, our gender, and our race. Laurie's work transforms photography's penchant for objectifying people, especially women, in a sustaining critical and, I should say, a sustaining critique of the medium. She's here with us today to discuss her new body of work and the exhibition Kigurumi.
I know. We'll talk about that.
Kigurumi. Dollar and How We See. It's currently open, and really you've got to see it. It's spectacular. It opened March 7th, and it's at Salon94. And it uses Japanese Kigurami to explore these themes on human scale. And of course, if you haven't seen The Music of Regret, which stars Meryl Streep and is done with Ed Lockman and some Alvin Ailey dancers, and just spectacular. It's such an amazing film. And an achievement. We are joined today with, for the dialogue, by Fabienne Stephan, who's a curator, born in Switzerland and based in New York. Recent exhibitions include early works at White Columns. She's co-curated with Marilyn Minter and Matthew Higgs, and the first U.S. exhibition of Swiss artist Allure Gunadats at Art Space, and you're going to have to correct that one as well, I'm afraid. Anyways, thank you both for coming, and we could begin now. So we're just going to turn on, not that light, yeah, there we go.
Yes, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me, and nothing makes me happier than to be in a room full of women talking about my work. Nothing makes me more comfortable. I'm a morning person, so this is perfect also. So for me, this is really a pleasure to be with so many esteemed and accomplished women in the world that I basically grew up in. Of course, I'm the most excited about talking about my new work, the work that's hanging at Salon, but we've included just a few of my older works just to kind of give a sense of what got me to the point that I am, where I'm dealing with these Kigurumi characters. Kigurumi is a form of Japanese cosplay, which is costume play. So having started with tiny dolls in interiors, I've worked my way up to human scale dolls and interiors. I also want to apologize because I'm getting over wicked bronchitis, but better, just a lingering cough, not contagious. So. But Fabienne, who knows my work super well and who is a director and partner in Salon94, and I will try to have a little bit of a dialogue about the older works leading up to the Kigurumi works. This is one of the first images. This is a 1976 portrait straight on of a little doll that I found that was probably made in the 1950s. And although it doesn't feel radical in any way to us now with our sensibility about depth of field and even approaching a doll as a subject, at the time I remember feeling really self-conscious turning my camera on a little doll and actually making this portrait. So this dates like 1976 and is what I consider one of my first images. So this is one of the first doll images that I made in color. I'd been to a show at Sonnabend Gallery and I saw Jan Dibbett's piece that was a rainbow that was basically, some of you may remember this work, but it was basically these tiny little photographs, kind of Hockney-esque in a way, that were depicting a rainbow. And I went and asked the guy at the front desk. What was amazing was in those days, in the 1970s, you could actually talk to people in galleries. It was completely unintimidating. And not only that, as a young artist, you could ask to go see the works of Jan Dibbett's or Jan Groover or John Baldessari, and people would take you in the back. Isn't this amazing to imagine now? Take you in the back and like show you prints. So I asked the guy at the front desk at Sonnabend, who is still the same guy at the front desk, Nick.
Nick's shiny retired.
He did? That rocks my world. And I went up to Nick, who I later knew because my husband showed with Sonnabend for 10 years, and I said, how did Jan Dibbett's make these? And he said, he just sent the photos to the corner drugstore. He shot film and he sent the photos to the corner drugstore. That completely was a light bulb moment because I thought, wow, I can do color photography because I can shoot film and send it to the corner drugstore, which I did. And I started shooting color and sending it to the corner drugstore. And then I started to learn to print. And this is one of the first little tiny Cibachromes that I learned to print. So we're dated now around 1978. So I started with black and white and kind of moved myself through color. And because I'd never studied photography in art school, parentheses, because I thought photography wasn't art, I ended up being completely self-taught once I arrived in New York because there had never been a situation where I had any formal training. So, and if you have questions like...
Where did you go to school?
Tyler School of Art is part of Temple University. There really were very few. I applied to RISD, Pratt, and Tyler. There weren't that many places to go if you made the decision that I did, that you would only go to art school and not go to a liberal arts school with having a major in art. So there really were kind of limited choices. This is the companion picture to the bathroom picture, and these were toys that I kept in their boxes and just turned my 35 millimeter camera on them. And I remember feeling like the intensity of color and scale and composition were very reminiscent to me of Indian miniatures, something that was really interesting and provocative for me to try to think about photography as having the same kind of compositional space as an Indian miniature. After I had my first show at Artist Space in 1979, which was a show in the hallway of those small images, I was offered a show at PS1 and I had no work for the show. So I decided if these housewives were the kind of 1950s depiction of women in my memory, what would the equivalent be? And I thought the equivalent male option would be cowboys out on the range. I was sort of thinking about TV as being my reality. So my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, had this set of cowboy characters at his parents' house that were put away His mother had knitted little jackets for them, and they were, he called them the big figures. So in 2 days in Connecticut, I photographed all of his cowboys, and that became my 1979 show at PS1. And it was February. It was probably February or March, so everything was a kind of monochromatic, right after winter, right before spring color. And, you know, it was interesting for me to understand that I could shoot an entire body of work in 2 days for an exhibition. I mean, would that we could do this all the time, but... This is going ahead in time to 1983 when I started to increase the scale of my work. It's from a series called Color Coordinated Interiors, where I found these little Japanese dolls that I color coordinated to rooms. At this time, this is pre-digital, so I would go to the picture library at the New York Public Library, and you could check out 100 images if you wanted to. So I would check out these very beat-up pages of interiors, and I would organize them according to red, green, yellow, and blue. And I rephotographed them, and I have notebooks and notebooks that are filled with backgrounds, and I would project the backgrounds and put the characters in front of the backgrounds. So I neglected to mention that when I came to New York, it was really the most intense period of post-minimalist conceptual art, and the art that I really loved used systems. So in order to feel real as an artist, and in order not to embarrass myself as a woman who was shooting dolls, I always created a system for myself so that I could feel like Mel Bachner or Barry LeVay or Dorothea Rockburn or one of the many artists that I admired. I needed to feel like I was working in a system. Of course, I was totally allowed to break the rules in my system, which is true for most artists, but this was a series where the system was super important for me. To put a red doll in a red room, a blue doll in a blue room, and when I couldn't decide the color in this room, it was kind of coral, I used a yellow doll and a red doll.
And can you talk a little bit about size? Like when it became available to print larger scale, was it a question of technology, or was it more a budget issue? I find it always amazing how you kept in touch with the technology that was available to you at that very moment and made use of it for your work. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I think that for a lot of, I mean, I'm sure all of you know that at the time I picked up a camera, a number of women decided to pick up a camera at the same time, not knowing, none of us knew that there was really kind of a, you know, sort of a groundswell of activity in the photographic arena. And I think one of the things happened is that the kind of photographic history that we were being shown at the Museum of Modern Art was the kind of 4x5, 8x10, 11x14 history. It seemed like I and a number of other women definitely wanted to exhibit our work in the same arena as male painters. So it suddenly, I thought, I'm not going to hold the wall at 8x10 or 11x14. I've got to figure out a way to make a bolder statement. So that's when scale for me was really an issue of getting noticed, really an issue of being able to hang near painting. So fortunately, at the same time as my desires to get bigger were coming to the forefront, a lot of cheap photo labs were opening in New York, so you could make these really, I don't know what else to say, these really crappy prints for very little money.
Well, also the recognition of photography as quote-unquote art probably happened, except for a select few.
It was starting, but Fabienne and I were doing a talk for the photography group, the collectors of the Whitney last week, and I told a story about meeting with Linda Shearer when she was at MoMA in the early 80s, and Linda invited me for lunch, and she said, I want to figure out how to get your work in this museum. Because we had John Sarkowski in photo, he wasn't really open to the work of my generation. And Linda was thinking, well, how do we do this? Do we bring it in through the painting department? And I remember sitting there really kind of sad and downtrodden and saying, it's just not going to happen in my lifetime, Linda. It's just not.
So she started the project room then, at MoMA.
Yeah, she started the project room, and she, I think, also got Peter Galassi interested in this kind of work, because when he first came to my studio, it was 1991. Actually, 1992, the beginning of 1992, and he was determined, after doing the show Pleasures and Terrors of Domestic Life, to bring this, and I don't have the date of that show at my fingertips, but he was determined to bring this kind of work into the photo department. Now this kind of conversation seems really old, but it really was puzzling to people how they were going to deal with large-scale photography, women making photographs who hadn't come through a tradition of photography, who were citing Warhol, Baldessari, and a whole bunch of feminist artists as their influences, and not really sort of ignoring the photo history of the Museum of Modern Art, which was the only available photo history at the time in the early 80s. There was one photo history. Of course, so much has happened in that period of time. We see that there's room for a number of different threads of photography and of the photo history. So, but in answer to the question of scale, I think it was just like, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and how better to do it. Of course, what's interesting is that to make a show of tiny photographs right now would have a much more radical feel, just because of the cycles and just because we're so inundated with large-scale color photography. This was from the following series called Tourism, where I used the same strategies of putting the blue dolls in front of the Parthenon. This was actually a slide that I got in Greece that had been outside at a tourist, like a little tourist stand, and the sun had faded the slide blue. So I was looking for these slides that were sort of either Sendak slides, which if anyone ever took art history or taught art history in the 70s or 80s, that was the company where you bought your slides from. And their slides were always faded. Like, I remember in art history thinking, God, why is everything so pink? But I ended up sort of loving that look and using it as the basis for this series. This is called Talking Ukulele, and we're moving ahead in time to 1986 and 7 to a series of trips that I made to the Ventriloquist Museum in Kentucky, where I started thinking about ventriloquism as a way. I'm always trying to figure out how to bring men into my work. And it's always a challenge for me because women are depicted as dolls and mannequins. And so this was another way. I mean, no pun intended, but dummies were a really... Ventriloquist dummies were generally depicted as men. So that was a way for me to use to sort of bridge the gap between human and doll. This is a walking cake, and I don't know how many people made it to the art show at the Armory, the ADAA, but Salon94 put up a booth revisiting these objects on legs. And by the time I showed the first one, Jimmy the Camera, in 1987, they were 84 inches tall by 48 inches wide. So I was really playing with notions of scale and bringing the characters on legs up to life scale.
That's another one.
Yeah, these are all from the booth at ADA. Some of these I reintroduced at the time. I think this was 1991 that I made the microphone. I put a silver skirt on the microphone, and I thought that it was just I couldn't reconcile showing it then, but when I went back to re-examine what I hadn't shown, I felt like I really loved this image and hadn't had the nerve to show it then. So in the booth, I introduced a couple of things I hadn't shown initially. when I was doing my edit. This was another one, the tomato on legs, that I feel really excited about now. And at the time, I was afraid to show it because of the whole connotation of woman as tomato. Of course, if I talk to my daughters or my assistants and I call a woman a tomato, they have zero, it's one of those words that's just that and cheesecake. It's one of those words that just passed through the culture. It just doesn't exist anymore. Obviously, many of us here know that what probably was a kind of calendar term or even a World War II term for a woman, that hot tomato, but it's meaningless now. And I still really love the image.
Didn't your foray into printmaking in the 1980s help? I think print-curators were very accepting of your work, and museums across the country were buying the photographic images that were printed via ink. At the Zimmerly, we have two of yours.
That are
from 1986, one from the ventriloquism series and one from the series that were printed with Maurice Sanchez at Dairy.
Right.
So
I was a printmaking major in art school, but when I came to New York, and I actually got into graduate school to study with Warrington Colescott at, wasn't Michigan, it was Wisconsin. But what happened was I discovered that there was a separate world of printmaking. And I was really upset that all of the printmakers that I knew were fairly unknown in New York. And in New York, the prints that were getting attention were prints that were being done at ULAE by Jasper Johns and Rosenquist and Rauschenberg. So I thought, wait, what? This has been kept a secret. The idea that the printmakers that are at the forefront are actually artists that are using it as an ancillary activity to their main work. So I was really upset when I realized that, because I was on, on a path to be a printmaker. So I think for me, photographically speaking, I felt more comfortable in that arena because of my background in printmaking. But I never saw printmaking as any kind of primary activity for me, ever. I was only interested in visiting it, sort of revisiting it, because I'd enjoyed it in school. And I still feel like there's a tremendous split between the world of printmaking and the art world as we know it.
So you also, just to say, there's the video that goes along, or an amazing film piece that goes along with the Wade's series.
That's the Music of Regret. That's the movie.
So that's a clip inside of Music of Regret.
Mm-hmm. The Music of Regret is based on this photograph. It's a musical in 3 acts, and it sort of takes 3 different periods of my work and focuses on them and has the characters come alive and sing and dance.
I think I've seen it in sections.
It's not out there to see. There are some clips. You can get to it on Vimeo if you have our password, but it never had a theatrical run. And I think probably my hope is that if I make a second movie, which I intend to do, that it could be a little 45-minute piece in the box DVD set of the second movie. That's dreaming, right? So this is the character, the female ventriloquist dummy that was made in my own image, who's surrounded by this kind of coterie of admirers. And this became the basis of the film, The Music of Regret. This is from a series called The Instant Decorator. And they were pages. I did this when I couldn't go to my studio. I started it in 2001 when I couldn't go to my studio. And it was actually a page from a decorating book where you were meant to put your fabric underneath. It's such a silly idea, because this scale, it's like a man-eating herringbone. And look at the scale of the jockey print. But it seemed like such a great template and a new way to work in collage. And I used porn comics and fabrics and so many things that I had around to kind of create these rooms. We can go to the next one. And this is from a series that followed called The Longhouse. And I actually got a dollhouse that was very degraded. Everything that I've always done has always been kind of clear and clean and kind of, crystal. And this was a very degraded, messed up dollhouse, and it made me think about moving through spaces like they were bordellos, like they were dark places of the night. And I used theater lights, and I continued to use cutouts as I'd started in the Instant Decorator. This is a drawing. This is a really funny thing to include, but it's a drawing that I made when I was 10 years old, and I used it as the end paper. The end papers in my most recent book, which is called The Love Doll. And The Love Doll is a series that was based on a Japanese sex doll that I found in Tokyo. And I ordered one. I actually ordered 2.
10 years old?
Sorry? I'm so sorry. Okay. That's a good question. I made the drawing when I was 10 years old. When I was X number of years old, I bought a Love Doll, and I did the entire Love Doll series. I shot over the course of 36 days of shooting over the course of several years. And I had a birthday lunch. I had a big birthday, and I had a birthday lunch with my sisters, and one of them had saved the drawing I made when I was 10 years old and presented it to me as a birthday present, and they said, you've always been interested in love dolls. It was so touching, number one, and number two, it became the end papers of the Love Doll book. To think that I had been drawing geishas when I was 10 and then moved on to this series, which for me was significant because it's a life-size doll, finally, that I could work with.
What year that you found in
That I found in Japan.
What
year was that? Did you found
2009. So this is the Kigurumi are my most recent pictures, but this preceded it. This was my first show at Salon94 in February of 11.
And this was one of the first photos you shot.
Yes, I started shooting it in black and white, and it arrived, just to be really graphic about it, the Love Doll arrives in a crate, you unpack it, there's a separate box that has a wedding ring and the genitalia. And lubricating cream. And I took out the ring. I basically took that box. I got 2 Love Dolls and put it on a very high shelf in the closet. I don't think I've ever opened it. One of my assistants did. But, my desire was to work with the doll as a life-size doll, not as what she was intended to be. So I basically moved her around the house, the place where I work in Connecticut, and tried to find a way to make her as real as possible. I love this picture. It's called Shiso Soda. And I brought that soda in. I'm fascinated with Japan. Fabienne is too. We're both sort of obsessed. And Pepsi does a designer soda every summer. And the summer that I was there, Shiso Soda, which was bright green, was that summer's designer soda. They've done cucumber, they've done all these crazy sodas. So I brought the bottle back with me. And then when I started to shop for clothes for the Love Doll, which I did eventually do, I went to Target with the bottle of Shiso Soda because I thought, I'm going to find a blouse that matches.
But it's almost like you're having this conversation with yourself, like with your past work, with color matching.
Right.
The elements in your picture.
Color matching is really important to me. And this was called, I don't remember the day number, but it was called Candy. And I was very conscious that everything the Love Doll did, she was doing for the first time. Like I tried to imagine, what's it like to look at Candy for the first time? This is called 20 Pounds of Jewelry, and I was on eBay late at night looking for props, as I often am, and I saw something advertising 20 pounds of jewelry that I could bid on, and I thought, what exactly would that even be?
Mardi Gras beads.
Well, unfortunately, most of it was Mardi Gras beads, but a lot of it was just costume junk, and when the jewelry arrived, I had 2 assistants, and I said, okay, go to work and start putting jewelry on the Love Doll. So she was actually naked, and we had so much jewelry that we could just drape her with jewelry. And then the last touch was to take a lipstick and go outside her lips, almost like a child that had gotten into her mother's jewelry and makeup. And I'm really proud to say that the Whitney bought this from the show, so this was their favorite, as well as the next piece. Oh no, I'm sorry.
This one,
Yeah. This is the second Love doll, and it's called New in Box. And as we unpacked her, I thought, there's a photo here. I said, just stop. Let's set up the cameras. There is a photo here. And I feel like just that, I feel like it speaks to just the sense of how newly hatched this young woman feels, speaks to so much for me about a young woman's experience, like that transition from, child to young woman, and how baffling that is.
And how big was this?
These are big. They're not quite as big as the, I'm still up in the 72 4-inch scale. Life size. I mean, so you feel like you're engaging someone your size. And this is the other one that the Whitney got. And one of the only ones where I had the two. I did not have good success putting the two Love dolls in the same space. And maybe it's something I'll go back to, but this is the only one where I felt like I kind of got to it. So,
What do you mean by didn't have success in putting two together? What success in feeling that you did a good work, or success, marketing success?
oh no, I never,
kind of
I never talk about market success. I'm really old school that way. When I say success, I mean that if I show 10 pictures, I would say on the average, I probably shot 50 to 100 scenes. That's why there's always so much work for me to go back to if I want to revisit. I'm so self-critical about what I'll let out. It takes so much for me to know to feel that a picture works. So I tried a number of scenarios where I took the two girls. There's a barn on my property, and I had the two girls in a very empty space sitting in two chairs far away. I had a picture of them climbing trees. I'm just saying I go through a number of scenarios until I find one that I feel like really works. And what really works, why does it work? That is 100% intuitive response. And it's so interesting how easy it is to talk about the work on a conceptual level, a political level, a psychological level, but the basic decisions in the end are so intuitive about what really works, and about having trained my eye to accept certain things over, the course of shooting for so many years. This was the last picture in this series, and I had an assistant working for me for 4 or 5 years, and towards the end of the Love Doll project, I knew that she was tattooed because she would wear maybe a sleeveless shirt in the summer, and I knew that she had tattoos down her arms and something on her back, but she said, "Did you know I had a tattoo of a geisha on my back?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And she showed me, that's actually a maiko. It's like an apprentice geisha. And when Fabienne and I were in Japan a year ago, we actually went to a place where we spent an evening with geishas. That's a whole other story, but the whole...
Tell us.
Oh, it was really amazing, and actually a little bit upsetting. But we did spend an evening with, an apprentice geisha, and when I found out that my assistant had this on her back, I asked her if she would let me photograph her, and she did, in a space with one of my Love dolls dressed as a geisha. And what we would go through to dress the Love doll as a geisha, I invited over a group of people who have a business dressing Western and Asian women here, Japanese women here, as geisha, and it's a process that they have antique robes that they bring, kimono that they bring over. They have makeup artists, hair people. It takes about 6 hours to get ready. So we'd spent we'd had the people over to dress the geisha, and then I put my assistant in a second geisha wig, and she had full makeup on in the photo. So it was so many hours of preparation to get to this. But this was the final image in the series.
And what made you, can you tell a little bit about what made you want to dress the love doll as a geisha? Because we had one in the exhibition, and then you went back. You seem to be really obsessed with that geisha idea, and you played with the different kimono colors. And it was like the end of the series, really. Like the love doll goes back to being...
I think it was that. I think that I tried really hard. It was like, almost like the American Girl doll, or like It's a Small World. I tried so hard to take this doll and integrate it into my life and make it human. And then in the end, I feel like that cultural pull back to Japan as I first discovered it was so strong. And I think the other thing that fascinated me was that when I dressed the life-size love doll as a geisha, in photographs, it looked exactly like the dolls our parents brought back from Japan. The scale totally shifted. It was impossible to tell that it was life-size. And I think I was so fascinated by moving culturally back to Japan, as I think there are several reasons why Japanese culture is so loaded for me. When I was in my early teens, and this is, enough time had passed since World War II that suddenly, Americans were embracing Japanese culture as being everything modern. Yes, we were obsessed with geisha and cherry blossom dances and Benihana, but also my father's cameras. Suddenly, my father was an amateur photographer, which had a huge influence on me. My father's cameras were all Japanese, and everything modern, cars and cameras and things that we were dealing with, suddenly was from Japan. So there was this great focus on Japanese culture as being something. I think when I was very little, everything French was considered so worldly. I mean, anyone can remember how we felt like speaking French and eating French food was just the height of sophistication. And then in my early teens, I think around the time of the 1964 World's Fair, I think suddenly Japanese culture was in the forefront as being totally modern, bringing us everything new.
The tattoo, can you talk a little about that tattoo? She got an ear?
She got it when she was 19.
But
And
someone famous, sometimes tattoo artist?
no, she did. I think she did. I think she was just a kid. When she went to college in New York City, and she found a tattoo artist, and visited the tattoo artist. And I mean, generally, what happens is the tattoo artist that you find is really responsible for the design of,
I mean, the scale of it is substantial. It's
Beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
Right.
I mean,
But the plaid blanket is so different than everything else. That was obviously a purposeful choice.
the plaid blanket is a kimono that I bought in. She actually was wearing it. It's actually a kimono that I bought in Kyoto. And it's the one that I picked out. Of course, now I can't wear it because once I see something in a photo, it's in the prop category. But I shopped and shopped for a kimono, and that's the one that I got. And I know it seems really not to be of a piece, but it is the kimono that I bought in Kyoto. And I think I'm pretty sure it's got some age to it. It's not, the place that I was shopping, not that, they didn't speak English, but it's not a new kimono. It's very beautiful.
Is it silk or cotton?
No, it's cotton.
It is. It looks like a cotton
Yeah.
kimono.
Yeah, it's like it's very much more like a bathrobe. I mean, it's very beautifully made, but I thought the colors really worked, and I know I've never really thought about how odd it is in the context of this, but
I'm still curious about why someone would do a geisha on the back of there, and she wasn't Japanese, I gathered.
Having one daughter that's very tattooed and knowing so many, it's amazing when you think about that. I don't want to sound like a fossil, but when you think about the amount of, like, the kinds of decisions that go into, you know, that kind of ornamentation on your body, which is forever, I think it's far less than you probably than you would think. I mean, when I see some tattoos that, you know, some people have, I just think, whoa, you really did not consider that. But I do think that this is so exquisite. It looks like Wilma Flintstone as a geisha. But just to say that my work really is about color, so this isn't the best situation for the color part, but at least I get to talk about it.
Laurie, when you had the dolls up in Connecticut, did they become part of your life? Did you live with them? Did they sit in your living room and kind of stay there, or did you only...
I detested them. And I still do. It was really uncomfortable to work with them. I remember Fabienne came one winter, and she said, "Where is it?" And I said, "Look in the hall closet." And she just kind of opened the closet.
They're so scary.
They're not, I was never a doll collector. I don't over-identify with my props. I found having this life-size doll when not in use to be really, yes, creepy. And the whole thing was, I also had rules, and I wrote a diary as I shot, which is also included with the Love Doll book. But I never dressed the dolls. I never undressed them. I had 2 assistants, and I would give them the clothes. I didn't want to be part of the grooming. My goal was to take this inanimate object that was very heavy, very difficult to move the limbs, and make it as natural as possible. So that when people first walked into my show at Salon, a couple of people were confused as to whether they were looking at real girls or dolls. And that, for me, was a huge step in the evolution of my work.
Which brings us to this. People are very, very confused when they...
Yeah. These, I hope that some of you get to see my show, but at either end of the gallery are 2 images of these fashion models, and these pictures are called How We See. And the woman actually has her eyes closed, and her eyes have been painted by a makeup artist on her eyelids. So basically her eyes are closed, and there's sort of these 2, I think the thing that I really love about these is how much they look like that school of German realist photography, Thomas Struth and, well, what are all the names of that kind of German realism that I was always very both attracted to and repelled by. But these 2 women are sort of looking over my Kigurumi show, and since my whole show is about masking, I feel like the idea of these fashion models who are posing but they really can't see because their eyes are closed is conceptually and symbolically really great bookends to what I'm trying to do right now. So this is the beginning. This is the first image in the new series. And this is actually a mask that we ordered from Russia, made by a cosplayer. That's a costume player. Someone who creates these masks for people that go out in the world as dolls. So I think the masks are really beautiful. I already know that my idea of beauty is not always in step with other people's ideas of beauty, but for me, ending up in this place, to be able to shoot in this interstitial place that's somewhere between doll and human, where I don't have to move my dolls, where they're actually working for me, this was really fun, as opposed to the Love Doll. This was really exciting. And the people that were maskers, the people that dressed up for me, were actually people that I found them, they're modeling for me, but they had a really keen interest in doing this, because I put a mask on for a minute. It's not for me. I felt super claustrophobic. You can only see in a really cloudy way. I felt like I was looking at the afterlife. I mean, I put the mask on and everything was sort of cloudy, and I thought, I don't want to be in this mask. I'm not meant to wear it. I am meant to shoot it. But the people that were modeling for me could not wait to get into costume. They loved every second of it.
And the skin, you can notice that what looks like the skin on her arm is not actual skin.
In order to be a masker, you wear something called a Zentai Suit, which is like a spandex onesie that covers every inch of your body, your face, your hands, your feet, kind of like what Blue Man Group looks like. Just you're completely encased. Or they paint Blue Man Group. Do they wear onesies?
No, it's
they're
They
paint.
paint
Okay.
their faces.
Okay.
What is your relationship with Cindy Sherman's work?
What is it?
Yeah. How,
Well,
I don't say influence, but
I'm older than she is. But Cindy and I met. It's a story that we've both told so many times, but when Helene Weiner of Artist Space became interested in my work, I had a little box of those interiors, the doll interiors. There was about 8 by 10 box. And she wanted me to come down to Artist Space and talk to her about having a show. And she said, Cindy was the secretary at the desk. She said, I want you to meet Cindy. And I said hi to Cindy. And she said, Cindy has her work here too. So Cindy opened a drawer and pulled out her little box of film stills. And we actually, it was like, okay, I'll show you mine, you show me yours. And we actually sat there and flipped through each other's work. And, we've been very, very good friends ever since. And I remember feeling this sense of relief because Cindy's work had more schmutz on it, and the prints were worse than mine. And I thought, here's another artist who's clearly not working in the conventions of photography as we know it. So I really felt from the moment I saw her work that I had a kindred spirit.
and she's a wonderful giving person.
Yes.
So this model, this is a woman
Mm-hmm.
in New York City?
Mm-mm.
No, in Russia, you said.
No, the mask comes from Russia. The set is a little abandoned house in the northwest corner of Connecticut. Some friends had bought a property adjacent to theirs, and there was a little brick house on it. The family had vacated, and they said, maybe you want to use it as a set. And I saw it, and the scale was like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs house or something. The scale was so perfect because a number of people who've been writing me or talking to me about the exhibition want to know how tall the models are. Well, this model is 6 feet tall, and she's not a slight person. I think, number one, the latex clothing is very flattering. I bought all the clothing at a latex fetish store, and most of the clothing, the indoor clothing. And also, I think the scale of the house was so... Yes. And what I noticed was that all of the models really wanted to reach out and touch the walls. That wasn't something... I never said touch the ceiling or touch the walls. They all had a desire to interact with the space in a surprising way. I had to do so little, and that's what was so... Once I dressed them up, that's what was so beautiful for me after lugging around this 70-pound, love doll and trying to move the limbs and try to make it natural. It was so amazing to...
But you did ask them to... You placed them in the corners
Yes.
of the house, like you found the...
I found the spot
Yeah.
in the house where it felt right to me, and then I let them just move.
And the skin, quote unquote, of the chest, it's not part of the mask. That's something you would...
That's the Zentai suit.
That's the suit, and it matches so well the...
It has to match the mask. That's one of the rules.
And it just comes that way, or is it hard?
Well, I ordered Zentai suits to match masks.
Oh, okay.
It has to match.
Is the hair part of the mask?
Yes, it's like a football helmet. You really place the whole thing over your head. And it takes months to make them. This is just, I really see the masking as a kind of metaphor for the internet and the strangeness of never knowing who you're dealing with. And we were ordering masks from a kid in Russia who's a cosplayer. They're super expensive. We never knew if they were going to arrive. So one of my assistants in Connecticut would stalk him on Facebook, and she said, I don't know, he's been really clubbing a lot this week. And I said, I am never going to get my masks. We ordered, 2, and then we ordered more. And in fact, the last 2 masks arrived 2 weeks before the show. So the last 2 pictures in the show were shot literally 2 weeks.
This one.
Yes, this one just arrived, and I feel like I'm just starting to get to know this one.
What
And
are they normally used for?
going out as a doll.
And that one. That was the last one.
Do you order them like American Girls with certain color hair?
Yes.
Eyes?
Yes.
That's the last one you shot, no?
Right. This is the one that just arrived. I'm so in love with this one, and I still have yet to do a full body picture of her. And either we were in the interior of the house, which had no heat. I bought every heater in northwestern Connecticut, and still certain days we couldn't get the heat over 36 degrees. My models were such troopers. And then the outdoor shots were all in this snowy tundra because of this winter, because I've been shooting indoors where it was freezing or outdoors where there was snow. So I really feel like, as much as we all detested this winter, that it added to this kind of lonely feel of these photos, because I only had, a freezing interior or a snowy landscape to work with.
You use the term model. Were these professional models?
No, there were people who were modeling for me.
Okay.
One of them runs my studio in Connecticut, and she did help me do a lot of the research into the world of, raves and cosplay. And because when Fabienne and I were in Japan, we discovered this Vocaloid character called Hatsune Miku, who's basically a pop star. She's a pop star who's a hologram. And I became very interested in her. And, once you start to research as an artist, there's just so much coming at you, and where to land to actually shoot is a huge challenge. So
These costs, it's the Russian women that wear these?
No.
They seem much more Japanese.
It's Japanese, but the cosplay phenomenon is worldwide.
Yeah.
People go out to clubs. They also... Kigurumi really even includes big stuffed animals that show up at shopping centers that are paid to, give out flyers. This particular cosplayer, whose masks I like, lives in Moscow. That's just a coincidence. There are people making masks in probably in California, yeah.
Yeah. If you want, I can give you the information. There's this really amazing...
It's an age thing, I guess. I didn't know about this.
It is an age thing. And speaking of aging, I felt like it's a very rich metaphor for aging. For me, I'm constantly trying to figure out ways, metaphorically and conceptually, to speak to issues of aging as a woman. And I think masking is a really good place to start. It's given me a lot to think about. Because being a woman of a certain age and being able to live in this world, masking is a huge issue. How it's such a different... How do we leave our houses? How do we leave home every day? What do we do? What's it going to be today that gets us out of the house? It's certainly not throwing on a pair of jeans and a T-shirt like you did when you were 25 years old. There's a whole, especially for women that are in the work world, there's a whole persona that we feel like we need to arm ourselves. And I feel like the masking thing, this is just the beginning of my understanding of how I can use this metaphor to speak to these issues, which are very important to me right now. Super important.
I just wanted to ask about this little house.
Mm-hmm.
Is what we're seeing, and some of the other photos showed holes in the wall and stuff. Is that just how it was, or
Yes.
did you change anything?
Didn't touch a thing. In fact, my favorite, there's always a great comment, the greatest comment the night you have an opening, and the great comment from my last opening night was that Todd Everly, a photographer who I have so much respect for, said, "Who did your sets?" I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. This house, family had abandoned it. They'd obviously taken great care to paint the walls. Obviously, kids have come in and vandalized it. Probably they drink there. And it just provided this perfect place for me. But it was so funny to think about Todd's question, because one of the rooms, I think the room prior to this, had like 100 little pieces of tape on the wall, and I imagined some set dresser, bashing the walls in and putting the tape on the walls, and that beautiful blue stripe, which I felt like was so wonderful with the little red stripe, keeping me in the red, yellow, and blue system.
Laurie, did you choose the poses or did they choose them?
They if I liked a pose, I would ask them to continue, but there was a lot of, I felt like that I had both men and women for Kigurumi, for dollars, that's DOLLERS. Dollars go out, they're men and women, and they're not necessarily gay or straight. They're just people that want to dress as dolls. I felt like as my models became more comfortable, a persona would emerge. One of my characters was very playful. Another one got very erotic. Did we see the one with the pink and this one? She would often really just like sort of stick her bottom out. She was very coquettish. She was very tiny. My other character, who always wore the Nora mask, was very playful, kind of mischievous. So I let their characters emerge, and I felt like that must be a lot of what dollars experience. They must have a separate persona, because the persona, the kind of personality traits that emerged with my models didn't seem to correspond to the way that I knew them. And the other really interesting thing for me was, at the end of a session, how disappointed I felt when they took their masks off. Like, there's Danielle, who works for me, who runs my studio. There's Feather, that was another person who modeled for me. And I was always, there was like, was that a moment of disappointment I just experienced as they returned to their human being, their human self? And it gave me a little window into the masking community and what it might feel like to deal with this fantasy. It's been really very, there's always, when you're an artist, there's always like the journalistic thread of your work, no matter what kind of work you make. And I feel like that thread has been particularly interesting for me this time.
So again about the dolls, really, I mean, it's interesting because they do have such big personalities, but then actually trying to think about this as like a phenomena out in the world. I mean, how, when you're having this relationship to them, what is their actual voice like in the mask? Like,
they don't speak.
So they're not supposed to speak at all.
No, but one interest, I can say, can you move? And then I can hear a muffled voice saying, okay. And I'll say, can you just move a little to the right? And then he or she will say, well, I can't really hear you. But what Danielle told me, actually, I did a number of interviews online that go with the show, but Danielle happened to be around. She's the one that wears the Nora mask. And she talked to an interviewer, and what she told the journalist that I'd never really known is that when she was posing under the mask, she was always making facial expressions. I didn't know that in order to do what she needed to do, that she was emoting. And that was sort of interesting to think about, smiling under the mask or frowning or, widening your eyes or whatever. Because I was so involved in the surface of what I was seeing, I didn't really think about what it felt like to be in there for an hour or two posing.
It's also interesting. I mean, these women are, you talk about objectifying a woman. I mean, these women are objectifying themselves. I mean, they're going out, they're choosing to go out in the world as this object where they can't talk, they can't, it must be extremely uncomfortable to wear these in a club.
Well, you need to be led around, and there's a kind of, because you can't really see, so there's a vulnerability to that. But I do want to clarify and say, as far as I know, it's divided between men and women, but I think there may actually be more men dollars than women. So when you start to think about, and again, it's a subculture. I mean, the question, I have two questions for myself. Number one, have there always been these subcultures, these fetishes, but maybe in the court of Louis XIV there were some really wild sadomasochistic dressing up fetishes, but we didn't have the benefit of the internet to know what was going on.
Or maybe it equates itself to Venus Leopold.
Yeah, just this whole idea of dressing.
Are there male wigs?
A few, but not as many. A few. I haven't found that
If
many.
they can't see very well, and they can't hear very well, how are they actually interacting with each other? Or are they just looking, but they can't see.
I think it's more of a performance. I think it's knowing that you've dressed yourself up as your character and you're kind of being, it's almost like being a float in a parade or something.
It seems like that is the point.
But it's also
You
for
know,
the
that level of
photograph.
vulnerability. And
They
Oh,
perform.
right.
They perform for a photograph. They perform to post. They perform to post those
people
images
who are
on their
not
Facebook
prepared.
profile. It's really the
This is a really important
the-
point. I forgot about this.
The rise of this culture has gone parallel with the rise of people inventing personas on Facebook, on Instagram, and I think that's what was fascinating for Laurie as well when she started. When you found out about that.
Yeah, that they're really dressing up so that they can be recorded or do selfies or post themselves. You know, it's really a social media phenomenon.
In the research, did you find that this subgroup is literally a subgroup? Are they a submissive group as an S&M kind of?
Oh no, I meant a
I know
subculture.
you did,
Yeah.
I thought because they're so passive.
Well, I haven't found, and I don't know if Fabienne has, but I haven't found. I mean, obviously, there's a sexual component to the love dolls. We know what they're used for,
Right.
which is very hard to imagine. I haven't found a sort of sexual component to this Kigurumi doll or dress-up thing. Also, the Zentai Suit really is very difficult to put on, take off.
So it's more fantasy then?
Yeah, it's fantasy. It's about performance.
It relates to the geisha then, and sort of the whole tradition of that kind of dance. And
Yeah, but the thing about the geisha that we discovered, which was so interesting, and it was like, there were a group of us there, and afterwards I said to my husband, I have never seen you slip away like that in the presence of another woman during our entire marriage. These women are trained, geisha are really trained to play games with you and entertain you in a way that is phenomenal.
wow.
And it's not, I mean, we had friends with us who were on the floor imitating lions and tigers. I mean, everybody lost their cool around the geisha because they're really trained to figure out what kind of games you want to play, card games, singing games. I mean, it was really so. I don't know if anyone else has ever had that experience of. So I feel like the interaction from a geisha.
We're not going to tell you.
Yeah. No, it's so many tourists do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's tremendously expensive actually to get an evening with. But the geisha are really trained to interact with you and entertain you and take you out of yourself. And these guys really are performing. They're really not interacting. Don't you think that's true?
Yeah.
For themselves.
Yeah. I think.
Is there a particular age group that was interested in this, or does it just cover
What do you think, Fab? Do you know?
No, I think it really covers.
all ages?
Yeah.
It's
I
not
can't
just
imagine-
youth.
But it covers all it, yeah, like the documentary that we saw about the men particularly.
Mhm.
But when it's women, it's probably younger. And they, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the what's the documentary? It's a British documentary about men.
The Men in Latex?
Yeah.
I don't remember the name, but
Um,
that's another subset of
But
people.
it's really it really goes hand in hand, and the geishas do not go with that, because the geisha are about interaction, direct interaction. But this really has to do with people living their lives more and more today on the internet. And there's there's studies that have been done about young teenagers, or that, for instance, dating is going down. At least in France, there was for like 13 years old, 14-year-old, because their interface to the world is via the internet and their social media.
So dating is becoming younger.
Dating does not. No, there's less dating.
They're
not dating.
Less dating.
Yeah,
They're not interacting.
yeah, exactly. So that goes hand in hand with that. And then Laurie did this really funny gesture that she could never have done in the past, but I found so amazing because it could never have happened. A doll could never have taken a selfie, but this is what these dollars live for, is the selfie.
Yeah, that.
Because you also have, like, I don't know, in studies that are done about or people writing and noticing trends, like suddenly on Instagram, everybody who takes a selfie does the bird mouth, or like everybody does the same pose.
Yeah, there's a language of poses.
Yes, and so this doll face, is the same expression over and over and over again that you project to the world.
Well, I'm going to ask a really different type of question, but what are the additions of these works?
I always, you mean technically, I always make editions of 5 with 2 APs, and I always keep, it's very rare, I used to keep both of the APs thinking that I would give one to each of our daughters, but now, I mean, I make so much work and it's been so long, and but I do try to hold on to one of everything in an archive. So yeah, it's editions of 5.
Well,
I mean, yes.
So just one last question: do you, or at least for me, do you feel that you're still compelled to explore this particular series? It sounds like you're.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, one thing I want to say, the journalistic aspects are super interesting, but for me, the second point I was going to make is, what if in 1979 or 1980, when I was searching, and I feel like I've been searching for the same exact thing my entire life as an artist, which is this place between doll and human, woman and interior. I have not changed my subject. Yes, I've gone underwater. Yes, there have been some cowboys, some ventriloquist dummies, but basically this has been my subject. In 1980 or 1981, if someone said, I can show you a culture of people who live their lives as dolls, I think I would have thought my work here is done. I think that as much as we talk about the social implications of dolling and dollars and Kigurumi, I think this idea of finding this place between human and doll, between the two dimensions, is really what I've been searching for, this kind of, as I said, interstitial existence. Like that it's somewhere between fantasy and cartoon, and it's like where I always want my work to be visually, where I want it to feel like it is. So for me as an artist, I just stumbled upon something that has always been in my line of sight. I just couldn't find it before. Yes.
Are you going to continue working with the life-size dolls?
Yes. The humans in masks, you mean? Oh, you mean the love dolls?
Yeah.
I think that I'm done.
So what happens to them? They're creepy in that closet. Is there a market, second-hand market?
I don't know.
eBay.
I don't know. I wouldn't buy a used love doll. I keep my props. I have all of my the little sets, and I've been really careful. I saw a beautiful what was it at the Morgan Library, a Liechtenstein drawing show a couple of years ago, but he had beautiful little pieces of, they had beautiful pieces of screen and compasses and tools, and I always imagine someday, being able, I mean, already my little doll sets look like relics, because they were, they were created probably before I was born. So I just, I hold on to things. Holding on to a love doll is a little more challenging.
You said, you mentioned that these dolls have, she's doing faces and she acts under the mask and so on. Is it sort of the next step for you to unveil that mask and to have them actually acting in front of you?
Well, then I would just be dealing with a human face and an actor, and every time I've tried to do that, it's failed terribly, I feel like.
You tried?
So many times.
Yeah. What's interesting is that I think the latest iteration of American Girl, the latest series, are about getting dolls that look like the child.
Yes, there's
that's
that.
The first, that's early. That's the way it used to be at the very beginning.
Is it? Well, now
You
that
ordered
they're
a
doing
doll
that,
that-
they're doing that again. And
You can also order masks on the internet that look like you can send a photo and get a mask.
of yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so perhaps, are you?
So yeah.
Thank you.